Hailing back from the days of 1999 with Meteorot R, and also iconic for her role as the leader on Team Egypt in the anime. It is EPP00, Empress Patra, with a kit of Precognition, Punishment, Blow Away, Float Legs, and the leg ability of Through Fight, which grants a chance for melee attacks to ignore defense or bypass shields when attacking. Now, Empress Patra is a model that I've seen a lot of people in the Meteorot community here on the western side, and even my Japanese friends on the eastern side as well, have been begging for quite some time, and it's very nice to see her officially return with a fresh model. PS1 graphics really didn't do her all that well with justice, and with a completely fresh kit that kind of veers her away from the uncertainty that is a very random transform kit, with something a little more tangible and a little easier to master if you do manage to snag her. Precognition on the head part is a support-based skill that, once activated, is basically Hypercrept 2.0, which means it can choose up to 3 random buffs and apply them to herself and all allies across the team. These buffs can be anything from shoot boost, guard boost, mobile boost, and even stat cleanse is added in that pool, in contrast to Hypercrept, which does not, and can make it much easier to stack and make use of if you want to get a lot of buffs very quickly across the team, especially if you have someone on the team that benefits from those with a leg ability like Holy Grace. It is, however, worth mentioning that Precognition also seems to have a much lower duration with those buffs because it gives you so many at once, in contrast to Hypercrept, which only gives you 2 but usually will last about as long as the buffs will normally. Punishment on the right arm is a relatively new skill that we just started seeing a rise of, but basically it serves as an antithesis and counterpart to Sujigiri. But to explain briefly, Punishment deals times 1.5 damage to a forward-facing enemy, but only half damage to a rear-facing enemy. However, whether you catch them in the front or in the back does not matter to Punishment because there is an added bonus to it. In addition to punish damage or punish damage to you for catching them in the back, you also can deal 1 of 5 different ailments at random when attacking the enemy. And these ailments are Metaphor Seal, Wave, Fire, Thunder, and Bug, I believe, are the 5 that are in that pool. And because it's random, you can essentially spam it endlessly and not really have to worry about what ailment you're going to make use of. Of course, with that sense of randomness, does make it kind of tricky to consistently make use of Punishment, since you really don't know what ailment you're going to get out of it until you actually hit them with it, which makes it a little tricky to use conventionally unless you're really just using it for damage more than ailments. Blow Away on the left arm is another skill that we've seen more and more commonly in recent, but to explain, it essentially is a conventional melee skill that punches the enemy so hard it pushes the enemy away from you. And this can be used as a really good way to induce forced crowd control and stalling harder targets if you manage to outrun them. However, it is also worth noting that it is a very two-sided coin. If you juggle the timing of Blow Away, it can be very good for stalling that very dangerous nuker on the team, making sure they almost never get a turn whatsoever. However, if you are bad with your timing or if you miss it by even a half second, Blow Away will completely accelerate their cooldown phase so that they can start their next turn unimpeded thanks to your unintentional assistance. Float Legs means that Empress Patra will have a pretty solid coverage across all terrains at A rank across the board, minus of course S rank on Cyber, and her stats across the board are actually not too shabby either. I'm not going to say they're absurdly broken like most other boss types, and she's actually pretty well rounded for a float typer that we've seen in a while, with the exception of somebody who is just absurdly broken, such as say Metal Eater or Spanag or someone of the like. In terms of armor, she is relatively healthy in that department too, with a hit HP of about 3500, right arm about 3150 and left at 3250 HP, and the legs at 3600 HP, moderately healthy HP pool there, so she can most certainly take a hit moderately well without it breaking her too quickly. Her legs are honestly pretty solid as well across the board with the stats. A base mobility of 845 puts her on that very nice sweet spot in upper tier where float legs tend to want to sit at. And with an evade of 875, not too shabby either. Probably won't be dodging or grazing a lot of stuff, but she will have the chance to occasionally do so if she feels like it. A melee resist of 1162 is pretty nice, as it means she can hold her own up close and personal moderately well, but a shoot resist of 763 is probably going to be a pain point for her, as it does mean that she will be taking considerably more damage from incoming shooting skills than she would incoming melee ones, which may knock her down just a little faster than what you'd really like to while she's on the field. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I still do have to rate her a pretty solid 6.5 out of 10. Her kit synergizes decently well together, but her arms require a pretty hefty amount of juggling if you want to figure out which one to use. Because between Punishment and Blow Away, they both kind of counteract each other to a point. Punishment requires you to attack somebody who is forward facing, whereas Blow Away, even if you manage to time it correctly and push them back at start, basically will allow them to finish their heat phase by the time you finish your cool phase, which at that point, Punishment is kind of only dealing half damage at best unless it's just somebody absurdly fast. However, it is also worth noting that the Through Fight leg ability does give her just a little bit extra oomph by being able to ignore defense when attacking, up to a 50% chance when capped at full 5-star, or bypass any shields that are in effect, which will give her just a little bit more of a competitive edge on the field to guarantee that if someone's trying to stop her or intercept her, she's going to basically look the other way and keep on marching toward the target she actually was aiming for. As mixed parts, I do have to rate her just a little bit higher at a 7 out of 10, given that even though Punishment and Blow Away are kind of weird together, Float Legs and the Hidden with Precognition are both really solid and something you generally can't ever go wrong with. Precognition for if you need basically instant buffs now, even if the buffs are randomized among a pool, and Float Legs, even if they only have one heavy slot on there, it's still pretty solid as well, and that's not factoring in the extra 10% that she'll be getting across the board on basically every terrain she's put on. So she's speedy, she can hit moderately well, and the randomness of Punishment is kind of a nod to her earlier kit if you want to call it that, but it's still very nice to see her return to the games all the same.